everybody, and welcome to the Harry Potter Trading Card Game Podcast. My name is Sammy,
And I'm Momin.
and today we are going to be continuing kind of this deck building or talking about deck playing, whatever concept that we started in the last episode. And today we're going to talk about life as a resource and what that means and how to get comfortable with that in this trading card game because it's different than Magic or whatever other game that you happen to play.
Because life decking is not like a very common thing in trading card games. I know it exists in a couple other ones, but
I feel like it was more popular kind of in like the early 2000s because
yeah.
I can think of like I think Mega Man was back in the day and that did it.
Mhm.
This game and there was some other old game I played back then too.
There's definitely times where it feels bad when you're playing the game and then they hit like all three of the cards that you
Yep.
needed to like turn this game around and you're like, well, I guess I just lost.
Yep.
It also makes for very interesting decision-making space, I guess, in the game.
Oh yeah, because it just makes you think about your deck in a very different kind of way and the cards you're putting in it and how do I get those back from the discard pile? How do I make sure I draw them, search them? Like it makes you think of all of those things
Yeah.
so differently.
Yeah, or do I even need cards back from my discard pile? Like there are
Yeah.
some decks. It's not recursion that they want, it's redundancy in their deck. I don't care about losing XYZ card because ABC does the exact same thing or does like the same thing but slightly different.
So making sure that you understand your deck, which we talk about a couple of times, it matters so much. Like knowing the cards and not memorizing it entirely, but really knowing what your deck wants to do and what those lines are.
You'll probably hear that a bunch of times in this podcast
Probably yes. Both of
because
us have been playing TCGs for a long time, and you are more competitive than I am. But I still like understand like that concept, and I use it a lot in my games.
anyways, going on to the meat of the stuff. First of all, we're going to do a general overview of what are the resources that you have in this game, which are pretty simple. You have cards in play, you have cards in your hand, you have your actions that you have every turn, and you have cards in your deck. And the last one is what we're primarily going to be focusing on for this. Hopefully, we'll have something else on the action system because it's very interesting
That would be a
to
great episode.
yeah, look at actions used versus like effective actions. You know, action compression is a really big part of the game when you only have two actions. Like, how can I make all of my actions be meaningful? Or
Mhm.
do I want to be like Frizz's very strange deck where he just tries to get a billion actions and do nothing?
And just spin the wheels at
Yeah, it's something.
it is. The deck will come together, and one day Lucius's Kane will be really great and top
Yes.
tier. But that day is not today, and it will not be a year from now. It'll be like 10 years from now.
Possibly. Possibly,
Maybe.
possibly. You've probably heard from like other games, mostly Magic, I guess. I don't know where the phrase comes from, but life is a resource. I first heard it in Magic. I think, Sammy, you probably also first heard it in Magic.
That's where I first heard it, but it wasn't the first game I played, but nobody really talked about it in that kind of way until Magic.
Magic is the grandfather of like competitive TCGs, I feel.
Yes.
In games where you have like this life point counter, like you're counting from a set number, and then when you hit zero, you die or whatever.
And the whole idea is that whether you have one life or whether you have 8,000 or 20 or whatever the number is, you
Yeah.
still win.
Yeah.
Being at one does not mean you lose. It just means you win with less life.
Yeah, there's an infinite distance between 0 to 1.
Now the calculus teacher in me is going to come out and we'll start having.
That's very different than in a life decking game like HPTCG, where your deck is your life points. So when you're taking damage, the game state is changing in a way that is not just a counter is ticking down, especially for like slower decks, especially combo decks that have specific pieces that they need to find. They're using their life usually as a resource by playing a slower game, letting their opponent take tempo and probably rack up some damage on them, and they're going to be losing pieces from their deck. That's possibly their combo that they need to win the game. Or like if you're playing control or whatever and you have some specific board wipe that you need and you could just lose it when your aggro creature opponent decides to like hit 10 cards off the top of your deck. and you lose all three drawing the swords, and you're like, okay, game's over.
Game's over. I guess I'm done.
Recursion and redundancy is going to be a very important thing that you need to consider when deck building and when playing the game. When do you need to start looking into your recursion pieces to find these important cards in your deck?
Yeah, and that's really because this game or this type of game where your deck is your life, it's far more likely that you're going to go through those cards than something like Magic, where unless they're playing mill, which is essentially life decking when you're playing mill, but unless you're playing mill, it's not going to affect you in the same kind of way. So the types of cards you put in your deck, everything will just change drastically in this game compared to Magic or something else.
And more importantly, like recursion, since you're going through probably your entire deck, unless your opponent just like dirtles around for 5 turns and like OTKs, you're probably going to see almost every card in your deck, either in your hand or in your discard pile. So recursion actually gets stronger in that case. Like when you play Reparo and you have a 10 card discard pile, that's going to be a lot different than when you play Reparo and you have like one card in your deck and 48 cards in your discard pile.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Is that in this game, unlike, for example, we'll just we'll just compare it to Magic because it's the easiest thing to do. But in Magic, like you're going to see your opening hand of 7 cards. Let's say you're going to see another 5 to 10, maybe more if you have a lot of draw, if you're like in blue or something. But there's usually a cap at the number of cards you're going to see in your deck. If you're playing like Commander, you're probably going to see more because there's just more card draw and whatnot. Whereas in this game, you every single game are likely going to see every single card in your deck, whether it's through damage or drawing, but you're going to see it every single time. The more you play the same deck, the more you should kind of get used to knowing what's inside of the deck. So that should help you memorize what's there and know what you need to draw into or what kind of pieces you need to get back or that kind of thing. So don't just like take the damage and just ignore the cards going into your discard. That is, again, a piece of your life and something that you need to start knowing is there. So just pay a lot of attention to that.
So let's talk a little bit about getting comfortable at being at low deck totals, because this is something that is probably going to happen when you play basically any deck. Your opponent is trying to deck you out. So you're going to lose cards from your deck. As Sammy said before, winning at 1 life, winning at 2,000 life, winning at 1 card in your deck, winning at 45 cards in your deck. If you want to have 45 cards in your deck, you probably just like stomped your opponent super hard.
Super aggro.
There's this kind of a fear sometimes, I think, when people get down to like low numbers of cards in their deck that they're just like afraid to draw cards.
Yeah.
Or like trying to index too much into maybe trying to stop your opponent from dealing damage mitigation rather than advancing their own game plan. It's playing to win versus playing to not lose. These are two very different things. And sometimes you need to bring yourself closer to losing in order to attempt to win the game. Not saying that you're going to win every game. If you are, hit me up. I need to learn from you.
Then you are a master, yes.
And maybe you should also be on this podcast and tell us when you're getting lower in the cards of your deck, you probably hopefully should be thinking about like how does your deck function and how does your opponent's deck function. But one of the more important concepts is like where are your important pieces? How much damage can your opponent possibly push? What are you scared of that's going to be trying to win the game for your opponent by dealing enough damage or making you draw too many cards? Like this concept of reach. Where's their out of hand damage? And when should you feel threatened that your opponent is going to win the game? Like, what's that breakpoint? So that's a very meta call that you need to make and that you're going to get more comfortable with when you play the deck more and you play into other players more and see a wide variety of things.
I want to go back to something you had said, kind of starting out this section, and that was the whole concept of just getting comfortable. Well, we both kind of talked about it. But one thing that we've seen over the past 5 years, and I think this just looking historically back, I'm going to backtrack actually. So looking historically back a little bit, like if we look at like 2015, 16, when this entire project started, it was really the first, it was so long ago, it's 10 years, which is wild. 10 years ago, that was the first time that like a competitive nature for the game had kind of been around. And at that point, over 10 years, since 2003. And there were tournaments and, people winning. So people were starting to look at that point at the competitive nature of things and like, is card draw good? Is it bad? Where should my resources be? All of those kinds of things. And then when we started online tournaments about 5 years ago and we started releasing our own sets, I noticed many people were very uncomfortable with drawing a lot of cards. And like Peeves was a really powerful tool because of what it did to everybody else. But then to yourself, you were like, do I want to draw seven? And people were sometimes afraid of that. And then we replaced Peeves with Cedric, which is a draw six for yourself. And that was in 2023, I think, maybe 2024. And at that point, people were a little more comfortable with like drawing and understanding that I can win with less cards in my deck. Like it's still a win. And there's just been this like slow change as people understand the game more and as people understand kind of like how the game functions, how the cards function in it. And so we're moving in this direction where I think more people understand this concept of winning with one card is okay. It still is just kind of this like fear point that people have. Getting over it is really, really hard, but I think all the things you just mentioned are great things to think about to get over that fear.
It also comes kind of naturally to me as like a very hardcore control player. I always have to be thinking like, oh, when am I being threatened by my opponent? What are their lines of attack against me? And how do I live through them? Or if I can't play around them, how do I advance my game plan so that I'm possibly in a position to win in case they don't have it? Because a lot of times the thing is like you're trying to play around things that your opponent doesn't have. And if you didn't play around them, like you would have won the game. But if you are playing around them, then you're setting yourself up to lose the game.
And you actually bring up a really good point that I just thought about is like you're a control player, and you've said not in this game, but in other games. But I think with this entire concept, and we'll touch on this more later, but you should know your opponent's deck. And are they a super aggro deck? Are they mid range? Are they control? What
Mhm.
are they? So you know, and we'll talk about this in the next section, but how many cards to draw, what type of attention you have to give to your deck to make sure that you're not going to run out of cards. So understanding your opponent's deck is very important as well because they're going to be taking away your life in terms of your deck. So what you have to do in Magic and all these other games as well, but in these life decking games, you have to know it a little more because they're going to be taking away the cards you need to win.
It's also like Magic, there's a set point of like, oh, I hit zero and I've lost the game. In this one, it could be like, oh, if I mill 10 cards, my chance of losing the game rises dramatically because my chance of losing something important rises dramatically. So like this 10 damage actually matters a lot more than like the previous 10 damage, which maybe had like a 20% chance of making me lose the game on the spot versus whatever.
Well, yeah, and then you get this complicated. There's so many complications to a life decking game because then you have this other piece of the puzzle coming in where you think, okay, so I just lost 10 cards, my chance of winning went down by whatever percentage, but also did I just mill 10 cards and one of them is the one that I need to win, and can I get that back with like a cheering charm or one of the owls or something else? And like now is my chance going up because I can recur stuff. I don't have to search my deck anymore. And so there's just like these pieces that keep changing, obviously, throughout the game. And I think that's an interesting component to a life decking game is getting those pieces back and not having to search in the same way.
Yeah, like I'm gonna throw back to I think 2019 was our first online tournament.
2020, March,
2020
April,
March. Okay.
somewhere in there.
Yeah, Hannah Abbott was like
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the players for I think I lost them in top eight, I want to
Oh my
say.
God, I remember this game. It was
Yeah, it was
such an
pretty intense.
incredible game.
Yeah, where it was just always so threatening because it was their starter. I couldn't deal with it. And I knew that like at some point they were just going to use Hannah Abbott and get back their VTJ and then kill me. So that's like sometimes you have to be comfortable with the fact that, oh, I know my opponent can push X amount of damage. And once they hit these key cards, like since I have Hannah Abbott, I'm just going to win the game on the spot.
Hannah is such a good character. I remember
Yeah.
there was some other game. It was a Hufflepuff playing the deck. That's all I remember because their name was Yellow. Um,
Justin?
no, I
It
don't
wasn't
remember who it
Justin? Okay.
was. Oh, it was Jacob, who hasn't
Oh,
played with
yes.
us
Yeah.
since March 2020 or whenever that first tournament was. But I
Mhm.
remember they also played Hannah and they were about to lose because their deck was low. And what they did was they used Hannah to get back deboning
Mhm.
and then they paused their opponent for a turn. And at that point, I don't think deboning was restricted. So maybe
No.
they got back two of those, and then two turns in a
Mhm.
row stopped their opponent, and then they were able to play whatever damage card they needed. And just
Mhm.
using the discard pile as a resource to get those cards after taking so much damage was incredible. It was a wonderful end to that game as well. There was just so many great moments from that tournament of just decks. I did awful, but you did really well, and like the final matches were really really cool. It was so cool. I think they exist on YouTube maybe or something or on Twitch somewhere. Like if you can find those videos, go watch them because they're awesome.
All I remember was I had Norbert or Mrs. Norris out, and then I was like looking at my opponent's hand. And it's like, ah, yes, I'm going to lose the game in about 2 turns, and there's nothing I can do to stop this.
Yep. You're like, I see the writing on the wall and it's very
Yeah,
sad.
yeah, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Good time.
That'd also be
Times.
an interesting episode, talk about looking at your opponent's hand and like what kind of information that gives you one day. But
Yeah.
anyway, we're here to talk about life as a resource. So
Yeah.
let's shift into talking about card draw and how to use your deck in that way as a resource, and then also talk about healing after that because they're kind of related and they all kind of are related to the idea of your deck being larger or smaller and how you can kind of control that at various points in the game depending on what type of action you're taking.
Obviously, too much card draw, very bad. That's why VTJ kills people. Not enough card
Yeah.
draw, also bad.
Yep.
When you have to use one action to draw a card, that's pretty bad. So a lot of this is, again, understanding your deck. We're going back to this concept. But you have to know like when you should be scared of drawing cards and when you should not be scared of drawing cards. This
Yes.
goes back to understanding your opponent's deck as well. When are you being threatened by your opponent? At what time would that happen? And understanding your deck. Do you have all the pieces you need? Is there anything else that you're trying to search for in your deck right now? Do you need to draw it now, or should you wait until your natural draw is going to draw it for you? So card draw can be a positive and always can be a negative. But I think that oftentimes people think about the negatives a little bit too much rather than focusing on the positives of it.
Agreed. Like, and it goes back to that initial idea of don't be afraid of drawing cards and don't be afraid of like winning with one card in your deck. It's something you need to do. Like, you need to be drawing those cards to win. So, getting over that fear just helps so much.
It's also usually pretty hard to win the game without playing cards. And it's pretty hard to play cards without cards in your hand.
Yeah.
So, cards in hand, it's a resource. You can think about card draw, especially like measured card draw, not like draw 20 cards and die. You're just moving a resource from one space to another space. Like you didn't lose anything by drawing a card. It's gone from like this available resource to a different available resource.
That's a really great way to frame it because I think people see like your deck going down and they're like, my resources are gone and I'm now losing. And they're not like, I think the way you just described it, it's just a resource in a different spot is a really great framing. I really like that. And
Thank you.
for newer people out there, like start framing it in that way. And even for some like more experienced players, I think getting stuff back from your discard pile, whether it's with like Cheering Charm or the Owls or whatever, it's a resource in a different spot. It's not your deck. You're not going to draw it like you do normally, but it's still a resource. And I love that framing. That's fantastic.
The other thing that you want to think about with card draw is where is it coming from? Is it like consistent, repeated card draw? Like Leprechaun Gold is a pretty good card. It draws you two cards every turn. That's very strong. It
Yeah.
puts two cards in your discard pile. That also can be strong
Hmm.
for certain decks. But also, it can't be turned off.
Yep.
That's not very good. When you take 3 damage a turn, that's a lot more than taking 1 damage a turn from your own stuff.
Yeah, because drawing is still damage. It's not damage going to your discard pile, but damage in the sense of your deck is now smaller than it was before you did that thing. I think maybe that's also where some of the fear comes from with this is people are like, well, it's still damage. And like, yes
Yeah.
and no. It's just a
Yeah.
resource, as you said, in a different spot.
It's just that when this resource is out, you lose the game. That's
Yes.
Don't worry about it. Yeah.
Yes. But with things like Leprechaun Gold, I think it's really important to think about like, okay, do I want to always draw every single turn and discard something from my hand? There's a conversation going on right now in Discord about Lockhart and how Leprechaun Gold is a really great way to trigger him every single turn. So yeah, you want that card draw and you want to be using your deck in that sort of way because when you're discarding with gold, Lockhart's going to trigger at the end of your turn. But
Yeah.
if you're not playing Lockhart, maybe the force draw two is not what you want every single turn. Maybe you want something like photo
Quick,
album that may
yeah.
be forced still.
Quick Camp Kit is a May, I
That one,
believe.
yes. Yes. Great example.
So
But yeah, so thinking about what your deck wants to do and what your starter wants to do and like how your starter wants to use the resources in your hand and your deck and whether the card you're going to play is supporting that idea.
yeah, and sometimes you don't actually want static card draw, like or
Yeah.
repetitive card draw. Maybe instead of Leprechaun Gold, your deck should be playing like Endless Sandwiches because you're a deck that barfs out its hand and then tries to refill.
Wow, endless sandwiches. That's quite a throwback right there. I had to think for a second.
Dude, the card's sick.
It is. I love the art too, but I just had to
Yeah.
think for a second on that one.
That one, or like maybe you want overworked schedule and you just want that like burst of card draw. And then
Yeah.
you're usually going to have enough tools in your hand to then do stuff that bridges until your next injection of resources from your deck to your hand.
And it's also worth thinking about too. Like if we're doing endless sandwiches, let's just say you're drawing 7 with that card,
Yeah.
and then with gold, let's say that you're going to draw 2 a turn. Knowing what your opponent is playing, like can you do the 2 a turn and be in this comfortable position, or is drawing 7 at once going to make your deck too low, where now you're like, I don't really know. I'm too close to dying. And so maybe you feel uncomfortable playing one card or the other because of the amount. So when you play endless sandwiches and draw 7 cards, usually you want to be in a position where you're like, I'm going to win in a turn. This is okay to draw 7 and go down to 6 cards or whatever it is, because my opponent probably can't kill me, or I can kill them, or whatever the situation is.
Or I can play Love Potion and
Or you kill a potion.
yeah.
That's always an
I'm like,
option too. We touched on this briefly, but Leprechaun Gold versus something like Quick
what
Camp
can't
Kit.
get
Yes, that optional
Feeding
versus
Frenzy.
forced. We as designers, I think we try to make more stuff optional,
Mhm.
mainly because we don't necessarily want all of these forced things and forced triggers, and then people just miss them game playing, and then they have to walk back stuff, and then it just complicates gameplay. So we make it a may, that way if you miss it, it's not as big of a deal. But that
Mhm.
means that you really have to, as a player and a deck builder, think, what do I really want? Do I want force? Do I want optional? And explore all the cards that do those and do each thing. Again, going back to what I said about Leprechaun Gold and Lockhart or whatever the situation is, because that can definitely matter quite a bit.
Or like that thing with endless sandwiches versus leprechaun gold. Like additional thing that you need to think about is what is your deck weak against? What is your deck strong against? They're very different cards. One costs 2 and one costs 7, but also like assuming that your deck can play both. Is your deck weaker to like control decks where you need to have like that constant injection of resources from leprechaun gold or something? Or
Exactly.
is your deck weaker to more sustained aggro attempts and you need to be able to play like endless sandwiches and get a bunch of cards to find the answer now?
And going on with like this one-time burst of card draw, there's a card, Flitwick's Inspection, that forces you and your opponent to both draw cards equal to what the item's printed power or something like that. And
Yes.
as much as your deck is how you're going to like stay alive and give you cards to play or whatever, your opponent's deck is theirs. So you need to make sure that when you're playing these dual cards, like Gringotts is another example. I'm sure there's more, like everybody draws a card. Colin's Camera, all that
Uh,
kind of stuff.
Great Wall. Yeah.
Or yes, that one. Thank you. All of those things, like yes, you're drawing, your resources are there, but don't forget your opponent's deck is also theirs. So you need to make sure you're balancing that as well. And if you're forcing your opponent to draw, let's say you're forcing them to draw 3 cards a turn with whatever it is,
Colin.
Colin, yeah. Like, is that okay? Like, are you getting their deck low enough where you don't care about them having 3 more things in their hand that could potentially hurt you? Or
Mhm.
do you have a way to mitigate that? And so thinking about both of your decks functioning in that way is really important.
A lot of these are chosen in deck construction,
Yes.
which is like you got to throw darts at a dartboard and guess at the meta. Uh, it's really something.
Yep.
But some of them also like you can have more options in your deck if you'd like to. No one's saying that you can't run Leprechaun Gold and Endless Sandwiches at the same time.
Yeah, do both.
Yeah, see which one you like better. Maybe cut one, maybe cut both, maybe don't cut either. And you need both consistent card draw and burst card draw. I don't know what your deck is doing. Probably like, okay, maybe not
They're
Endless
drawing, and
Sandwich.
that's all that matters.
Yeah, okay. All right. Drawing cards. Good stuff, but sometimes not good stuff.
But
And
in
then
those moments where it's not good stuff, that transition, there's another thing to do to help kind of combat card draw, and that is healing. And I think that's something that's not in many games. I can't think of actually another game that heals like this game heals. I'm sure there's something. But the whole idea of healing is that essentially you usually shuffle or put in a random order or whatever cards from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck, and then it gives you back life, and that's a way to gain life again. So in Magic, normally like it's a life gain strategy. Yu-Gi-Oh, I think, also has cards that gain you life. In this game, it's putting cards back on the bottom of your deck. And so, not many decks, at least decks that I see, run healing cards. They're usually required some kind of lesson discard, which I think deters people from playing them.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to play like Kitchen House Elves or something, or Pomfrey is the popular one.
Right.
But so healing is a way where if you're nervous about drawing cards because your life is going down and down, you can heal stuff back and give yourself more life. And there's many more complex things with healing than just that. And we'll kind of talk about some of those in regards to your life in this part of it.
One of the big things about healing is that you get to choose the cards that you put back into your deck. So there's one way to build recursion into your deck. You're not like taking 10 random cards from your deck and like shoving them into your deck usually. You're targeting specifically like these are the cards that are going to help me a little bit later in the game.
Usually other non-healing cards, yes.
Yeah,
I think
like
always.
yeah, I don't think we've made a card that can heal healing cards yet.
I don't think we will, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. Anyways, this concept of like shuffling these cards back into your deck, it gets more powerful the lower you are in your deck. When you take 5 cards from your deck and you shuffle them into 40 cards, congrats, you've like those 5 cards that you chose is 1/9 of your new deck total. So you have a 11% chance to find one of those cards when you draw another card. If you take those 5 cards and you shuffle them into 10 cards, now that's a third of your deck. So you have like a 33% chance to find one of those 5 cards. In addition to like helping you not die, it also makes it easier
Yeah.
to find the cards that you need later on in the game.
Yeah, I think kind of the crux of what you just talked about is that more healing is not necessarily better. Healing
Yeah.
is a great tool, but it should be really targeted to helping you win. And yes, having cards in your deck helps you to win, but giving you back the stuff you need to actually draw, like that is how maybe healing is best thought about, and not just let me shuffle back 50 cards because it's better.
But because oftentimes like the rate on healing is just not comparable to the rate on damage. When you spend 8 to play Stargrass Salve, you're discarding a lesson, which is like about an action of cost to shuffle back in 12. With 2 actions, like your opponent is probably going to be dealing more than 12 damage to you.
Yeah.
That's just simple math. Like Pomfrey, when you play Pomfrey and you shuffle back in 12, you spent 2 actions to shuffle 12. Your opponent is, especially later in the game, is probably going to deal more than 12 damage to you with their 2 actions on their next turn. So unless one of the things that it does is it stalls out the game state. So like if you're in an advantageous game state, like maybe you have a bunch of creatures out and they have nothing, you can spend time to like make the game state parity. If you're not in an advantageous game state, like what if their creatures are hitting you for like 13 the next turn? I don't know if just healing 12 random cards is going to help you a lot in that situation.
Yeah, and there was a deck. I'm not sure if it went away when the lesson destruction cards went away, but it was like a transfig creature potion deck. And the whole idea was run maybe 8 creatures total in the deck, get them out, and then just remove your opponent's lessons with transfig and then heal yourself with potions. And then the deck just kind of sat there and just kept putting cards back in their deck, and they could get back their creatures that way, get back their lesson destruction cards that way, and they could essentially draw out the game for a very, very long time. And it was unfun to play against, not because of the healing, more because of the lesson stuff, but that is a way to kind of use healing too.
Yeah, like creating a parody, or not parody of the game state, but like a parody of like actions used to like effectiveness of actions. You're undoing your opponent's actions, then sure. If you have an advantageous game state, that's good for you.
And I think with healing, it's difficult because I think all of the cards that put cards back into your deck, maybe except for one that we made, is in potions. So the issue becomes you have to run potions if you want to run healing. But there is Madame Pomfrey and Snape, which are the 2 characters, I think the only 2 other than Kitchen House Elves. Those 3 characters will all heal you. So who else?
Fat Friar heals
Oh,
too.
Fat Friar. I don't care about Fat Friar. He was an awful card. I'm so
If
sad
you
because that card
have
could have been so great. And then they just made Fat Friar bad. It was very Hufflepuff-esque. And it's so sad.
also, if you do some weird like essential knowledge test in Justin Finch Fletchley, you can put 2 cards from your hand on the bottom of your deck without drawing cards.
Listen, if that jank is gonna
Nope.
happen, I would love to see somebody play that janky deck and do something cool with it, because that just sounds awful.
It does sound
It's
very
so bad. But yeah,
Mhm.
so pick not Justin, but pick another one of these healing characters and just put 1 copy into a deck. and run it, see what it's like and what it feels like to play a character for 2 actions, heal 7, heal 12, whatever it's going to be, and see if that heal helps to balance out the feeling you get when you're drawing a bunch of cards and keeping your deck total more of a stable number, and see what you feel like. And maybe you will really like healing and you'll be like, this is how I'm going to add in more card draw and be comfortable with my deck total changing so much. Maybe you're really going to hate healing and you're going to say, I never want to do this again. And that's fine too, but like try it. And I think the characters are a good place to start. Pomfrey is probably, if not the most played card ever, if not very close to it. And that's just a great card to start out with.
Also, don't just gem one. You should probably put at least like two.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like if you put one, it's very hard to see any effects. If you're trying to playtest a card in your deck, you should usually run more than you think that you'll need
Yes.
to see the effects on your deck in different states.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, I think now that we're talking about running Pomfrey or Snape or whatever, Pomfrey has kind of fallen out of favor. I feel like a little bit. Maybe I just don't see it as much being played. It still ran in like usually half the decks in tournaments, but I just feel like I really haven't seen it played in a tournament much. And
Yeah,
that could just be my games.
it's also that like Pomfrey and healing is very specific. Like I said,
Yes.
uh, it doesn't change the game state for the better usually. Oftentimes draws out losing positions if there's not important things that you need to recur. She'll be seen in decks that like create advantageous board states, which are like creature decks, or she's seen in decks that that just need the recursion.
Yes.
And she's less seen as like some sort of universal bomb for everything that you play Pomfrey and you win the game, because that's not how she functions.
Yes. So going back to your initial point where we're talking about shuffling 5 cards into 40 or 5 cards into 10 and the percentages of drawing those cards back, one thing to be really aware of is your opponent going to damage you and just get rid of the cards that you just shuffled back in?
Mhm.
Are they not going to damage you and you're going to be able to draw them? Or are you going to shuffle them back in and then search them somehow?
Yeah.
What does that look like? And then there's also healing cards that either shuffle into the deck or put them on the bottom of your deck in a random order. So if you're thinking about that, like if I put stuff on the bottom of my deck, I don't really care if my opponent is doing damage because likely they're going to damage the old 5 cards and then the new 5 that I just shuffled back in, I will draw one of those next. So that's something to think about too, is what does that look like?
Yeah, what type of healing you're having is very important. And especially, can you force shuffles on your deck? Like,
Yes.
if your kitchen house elves are healing like 2 cards a turn and you put like random jank on the bottom that you kind of don't care about, and then you do like a Pomfrey heal, now you've shuffled like the bottom like 8 cards that are like random jank back into your deck in any order. And now you've kind of diluted the draws that you're going to be having.
Mhm.
So like your draw power is now like it's less effective than it would have been.
Yes.
Or if you've been putting good stuff into the bottom of your deck, this is a way to make it so that your draw power is now better than it was, because those cards that were stuck at the bottom of your deck are now somewhere else in your deck. And the last thing that we wanted to touch on today is knowing your deck state. So your deck state is basically just a way to say the cards in your deck. And it can be figured out at any time if you actually want to put in the effort. Probably don't do this in an actual game where you just shuffle or riffle through your discard pile and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to compare with my deck
Yeah.
list. I see 2 fouled in here. I have 2 more fouled in my or in my deck. So my deck contains like 2 fouled, a 3 month long match, and like 2 catch the snitches or whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of like slow play.
Well, but I think at the baseline, don't do every card like that because I think that's a lot. But for
Yeah.
example, we're gonna go to a non-super competitive type of deck or whatnot. But let's say you're playing like a Trelawney match deck with no hand, and as a
Mhm.
backup you have Swallowed Snitch or Catch a Snitch, whatever. So match auto wins. You should know maybe I have 6 matches or 8 matches in my deck, and I have 6 match win cards. You should
Mhm.
know where those are. The other pieces of your deck, like it's cool if you know where they are, but it's not necessarily as important as at least knowing where like those 12 pieces that you need to win, where those are. So really try to pinpoint the things you need most. If you can know every single card in your deck and where it is every time, like Good for you.
Agreed.
I am not that smart of a person. But at least know those like key pieces. And if you can make those key pieces like 10 to 12 or something where it's manageable, great. I think if you have like 30 key pieces, that's a lot to keep track of. And maybe
Uh,
think about your deck building a little bit.
and also, you probably don't actually quite understand the idea of key pieces.
You're probably not.
Yeah, like you don't need to know the number of like Quidditch lessons in your deck in a Trelawney no hands deck. You can just know that there's enough Quidditch lessons.
Yes.
Unless you're like really, really far down and you're like, okay, I need to play no hands blind off the top of my deck, and like, what's the chances of me hitting a Quidditch lesson? Uh,
Yes,
which nice example. Had to choose like the one thing that actually cares about lessons in your
I did.
deck.
Yep.
Knowing where the right cards is super important,
Yes.
because that informs you on should you be drawing cards from your deck? Like, is that important? If all your cards are in your discard pile, and you need to know that, oh, I need to be finding recursion pieces for my key pieces now. Or if you have like no key pieces left in your deck and no key pieces or no ability to recur them anymore. Okay, now I need to just wait and hope that my opponent dies before I do with like my current board state.
Yeah, and so thinking about like knowing those cards in your deck or if they're in your discard pile, whatever, then building your deck to say, okay, my life is going down because these cards are being discarded and those are the right pieces I need to win. How can I get those back? Do I have the recursion pieces in my deck or do I not? So there's like multiple components to knowing where they are and also how do I have access to those things, whatever
Yeah.
that looks like.
And also about your deck state is if you know how many things you have, you can roughly have a gauge on like how much damage is acceptable to take. And once you've like started inching closer to that threshold, like maybe then you start to think about, okay, do I need to start damage mitigation now? Do I need to start draw mitigation now? Like, when am I stopping with these things? Or when do I need to like change gears and just start to throw everything out and say, okay, if my opponent has reach, they have reach. I need to just try to kill them.
Yeah, and so I think that's a really interesting conversation too with Leprechaun Gold. It's just a really great example of what we're talking about because it forces things.
Yep.
But like sometimes, like the thing in play that you have in play may be killing you. I forgot who I was playing against. I was playing against somebody, and they played Great Hall, and they were being forced to draw, and it was going to make them end up losing. They got less than 10 cards in their deck, and they were like, "Crap! Now, now what do I do?" And so, not being afraid to use your picking on, well, yeah, not picking on Neville, whatever removal piece you have to get rid of your own stuff is sometimes something you need to do. Or
Mhm.
being willing, when your opponent plays picking on Neville, to say, yeah, they're choosing my whatever it is in play. And the Leprechaun Gold is now killing me, so I want to use that as one of the two extra pieces to get rid of. And maybe you have to discard a lesson and gold, but if that gets rid of that gold that is causing you to die, that's okay. And so making the sacrifice to make sure that your like draw isn't going to kill you is sometimes something that you just need to do. It's rough to get rid of your own stuff, but sometimes
Mm,
it's just what the game asks.
I don't know. Having ditched two cards to pick on Neville never feels great, no matter what you're
It,
ditching. Unless it's
rarely
like
does.
unless it's like used pawn free and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna play pawn free next fight. It's a little bit hard to get into like this concept in such a general like surface level view of it without like saying, oh yeah, this is how this functions with regards to aggro or control or like combo decks. Because a lot of this is very just deck dependent and situation dependent and matchup dependent.
Yeah,
Mm,
so sometimes finding like at least knowing kind of what are the popular decks that are being played or what is the general like counter to that kind of deck or whatever that situation is. Like just being aware of the of that stuff can make some of these choices easier for you, whether that's I should play gold over Great Hall or Great Hall over gold. Like, do I
yeah.
need locations in my deck to help kill my opponents? Or do I need gold because my opponent, like I like their locations, or I know nobody's playing those now because they don't matter, or whatever the situation is. So just being aware of all of that really helps you deck build, and all of that then helps determine how much life you have left in the game and how you're going to use that life
So I guess that about wraps up our discussion on life and deck size.
on life.
On life, yeah. We had a very philosophical conversation here
But if
about
anything, this should give you guys like a starting point for how to think about using your life, or sorry, using your deck as a more flexible resource and being okay with losing, or sorry, with winning with a lower total.
so
And I think these conversations are meant to just give people that diving board piece too. So,
think about the game a little bit differently.
should we spoil a quick card that we're working on?
Here's one that's kind of on topic. There'll be a probably new Quidditch spell that draws a huge burst of cards called Impressive Flying, which is a 10 cost Quidditch spell that does damage to an opponent equal to the highest printed power cost among cards in play, and then you draw that many cards. So kind of Flitwick's Inspection, but it goes off
Yeah.
of anything and it hits them in the face, but it also costs more.
So a nice way to use your resource deck there to get a bunch of cards and hopefully win at that point.
Yeah, and also if I see everyone just playing this with Essential Knowledge test to not draw those cards, my heart.
Essential knowledge test. Oh, well, what an Heir of Slytherin card that was.
It's a sick card. I've
It
definitely
is.
played it main board because I need to not die from drawing my own cards.
Yep, because your deck is a resource. Yes, but
And sometimes you tap in a little bit too much.
sometimes, yep, just a little. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure to join us on Discord, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We have a lot of deck techs coming out. We just finished up a tournament. We have some events coming up next month, drafting, and a whole bunch of other announcements coming up. So we'll see you next time talking about whatever we're going to talk about next.
All right. Peace.